They say a mother always knows. I knew something was wrong the moment my son wouldn't look me in the eye. It would be better if you weren't at the wedding, Mom, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Just like that, I was erased from the most important day of his life. But what no one expected, what his perfect bride with her perfect smile never saw coming, was that phone call. Right in the middle of their vows, his cell phone started ringing, non-stop, insistent, like a warning bell cutting through the church. And when he finally answered, everything changed in an instant. The truth has a way of surfacing, even when buried under the most beautiful lies. What would you do if you discovered your child was marrying someone with a dangerous secret? How far would you go to protect them, even if it meant they might hate you forever? This is my story of betrayal, deception, and the lengths a mother will go to save her son, even when he doesn't want to be saved. If you're watching this right now, follow our channel for more heartbreaking true stories that will leave you shocked. Like this video if you've ever had to stand up for someone you love, even when it was difficult. And comment below where you're watching from. I read every single comment and would love to hear your thoughts. I always imagined that on my son's wedding day, I'd be right by his side, that I'd hold his hand, straighten his tie before he walked into the church. But that morning, I was alone, sitting on a wooden bench outside the Cleveland market with a bag of cold bread in my lap and my heart crushed inside my chest. They removed me from the guest list. My daughter-in-law said it would be better this way. My son just lowered his eyes, unable to face me. I swear, in that moment I felt as if my entire life had been erased. You know, I've lived in this town for over 40 years. Raised my boy here after his father passed when he was just 7. I remember how he'd cling to me at night, afraid the same darkness would take me too. I promised him I'd always be there. Always. When Michael met Vanessa 3 years ago, something changed. At first it was subtle. Missed Sunday dinners, shorter phone calls. Then came the excuses. Mom, we're just so busy with work. Mom, Vanessa's family needs us this weekend. I smiled and pretended it didn't hurt. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We swallow our pain so our children don't have to taste it. The invitation never came. I waited by my mailbox every day for 2 weeks, checking twice, sometimes 3 times a day. Nothing. Then Sarah from across the street stopped by with a cherry pie and sympathy in her eyes. Eleanor, I just wanted to say I'm sorry you won't be at Michael's wedding. I saw the announcement online. I thought maybe you were ill or something. The pie plate nearly slipped from my trembling hands. I managed to thank her, close the door, and slide down against it until I hit the floor. My chest felt like it was caving in. 63 years old, and I'd never known pain like this. I called Michael that night. The conversation lasted exactly 4 minutes and 27 seconds. I know because I watched each number change on my old kitchen clock. It wasn't my decision, Mom, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa thinks, well, she thinks you might make things uncomfortable. You know how you can be sometimes. How I can be. The words felt foreign in my mouth. You know, traditional, old-fashioned. Her family is very modern, very progressive. I wanted to remind him that his old-fashioned mother had worked 2 jobs to put him through college, that I'd sold my wedding ring to pay for his first car. Instead, I just asked, do you agree with her, Michael? The silence that followed gave me my answer. That's why, on the morning of May 15th, I found myself on that bench, watching pigeons fight over crumbs, while my only child married a woman who had erased me from his life. I'd gone to buy bread, but couldn't bear to go back to my empty house. Not yet. An old man with a cane sat beside me, offered me half his sandwich. I declined, but he left it anyway before shuffling off. Such a small kindness, yet it nearly broke me. My phone buzzed in my purse. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something pushed me to press that green button. Mrs. Wilson. A woman's voice, unfamiliar. I'm calling about your son's wedding. My heart stuttered. Yes? There's something you should know. Something about Vanessa. The voice lowered. She's not who everyone thinks she is. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat there clutching my phone, the bread forgotten at my feet. A crow landed nearby, its black eyes fixed on me as if it knew something I didn't. That's when I made my decision. Wedding invitation or not, I was going to that church. I needed to see with my own eyes what they were all trying so hard to hide from me. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly have imagined, was that in the middle of the ceremony something would happen. His phone would start ringing nonstop, and in that persistent sound, in that vibration that echoed throughout the church, I understood. I understood perfectly. Sometimes life has a way of revealing truths, even when everyone tries to bury them. And sometimes a mother's broken heart can be the catalyst for a revelation that changes everything. I've never been one to hold grudges. My mama always said that bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But this exclusion, it was different. It was like being told I wasn't a mother anymore. The day after I discovered the wedding, not from my son, but from Sarah's pitying eyes and Facebook screenshots, I sat at my kitchen table staring at photos I'd arranged in a timeline. Michael's first steps, his high school graduation, the day he got his acceptance letter to Ohio State. I traced my finger over his smiling face in each one, wondering where that boy had gone. The house creaked around me, suddenly too big and too empty. 40 years in this place, and never had it felt so hollow. The yellow wallpaper in the kitchen, the one Michael helped me put up when he was 15, seemed to be peeling away just like his love for me. Rain started tapping against the window, gentle at first, then more insistent, like memories demanding to be acknowledged. I remembered the way he'd run to me after his father's funeral, his small body trembling with grief too heavy for his 7-year-old shoulders. "Promise you won't leave me too, Mommy," he'd whispered. I had held him so tight that day, our tears mingling as I swore I'd always be there. But promises, it seems, are only as strong as the people who make them, and my son had broken his without even realizing it. I picked up my phone and scrolled through our text messages. They grew shorter and more infrequent over the past year. His responses became delayed, sometimes taking days. Excuses piled up like autumn leaves. Too busy, too tired, work was crazy. The last time he'd visited was at Christmas, and even then, he'd stayed less than 2 hours. Vanessa had remained in the car. "She has a migraine," he'd explained, not quite meeting my eyes as he declined the dinner I'd spent 2 days preparing. I watched from the window as they drove away, her silhouette animated and laughing in the passenger seat. Some migraine. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Mrs. Abernathy from next door, a casserole dish in her weathered hands. "Thought you might need some comfort food," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. That's how it is in small towns. Everyone knows your business, and privacy is a luxury few can afford. "Sarah told you?" It wasn't a question. She nodded, setting the dish on the counter. "It ain't right, Eleanor. A mother should be at her son's wedding." I nodded, throat too tight for words. The casserole smelled of cheese and sympathy. "There's talk," she continued, lowering her voice as if the walls might be listening, "about that girl he's marrying. The Petersons' daughter worked with her at that fancy real estate office in Columbus before she came here. Says she's not what she seems." My head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Abernathy shrugged, suddenly interested in straightening the dish towel hanging from my oven door. "Just gossip, probably. But," she hesitated, "they say she left Columbus under a cloud. Something about money missing from client accounts. Nothing proven, mind you." That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought kept circling in my mind. What if Vanessa was hiding something? What if her eagerness to cut me out wasn't about me being old-fashioned at all, but about keeping her secret safe? I remembered the first time Michael brought her home, how her eyes had darted around my living room, assessing everything, the way she'd flinched when I mentioned I'd worked in banking for 30 years before retiring. At the time, I'd attributed her discomfort to nerves. Now, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to the real estate office where Vanessa worked. I sat in my car across the street, watching her through the large glass windows. She was beautiful, I had to admit that. Sleek, dark hair, clothes that looked expensive but not flashy. She moved with the confidence of someone used to getting what she wanted. A young man approached her desk, and I watched as her entire demeanor changed. She touched his arm, laughed at something he said, but when he walked away, her smile vanished like it had never been there at all. A mask, removed when no one was looking. Something cold settled in my stomach. Every instinct I had as a mother, instincts I'd relied on to raise a child alone, screamed that there was more to this woman than met the eye. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered, heart pounding. Mrs. Wilson, the same woman from before. Listen carefully. Vanessa Harrison isn't even her real name. Ask about Columbus. Ask about the money. Who is this? I demanded. Why are you? But she was already gone. With shaking hands, I set the phone down. The silence in my house pressed in from all sides. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous, something that could either return my son to me or push him away forever. And that's when I realized the silence surrounding my daughter-in-law wasn't just disdain. It was fear. Fear that I might discover something. Fear that I might reveal something. Fear that I already knew. In the week leading up to the wedding, I felt like I was living in two worlds. On the outside, I was Eleanor Wilson, the forgotten mother going about her daily routines, watering plants that had outlived my marriage, nodding politely to neighbors who didn't know what to say to me anymore. But inside, my mind was racing, connecting dots that I couldn't quite see clearly yet. The mysterious caller's words echoed in my head. Vanessa Harrison isn't even her real name. I'd worked in banking long enough to know that people who change their names often have something to hide. The thought of my Michael, my sweet, trusting Michael, potentially marrying someone living under false pretenses, made my stomach turn. Tuesday morning dawned with a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of my little house. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, watching lightning split the sky. The weather matched my mood, dark, unsettled, ready to break at any moment. My phone rang, cutting through the rumble of thunder. Unknown number. My hand trembled as I answered. Hello? My voice sounded strange, even to myself. There was breathing on the other end, shaky, like someone trying not to cry. Hello? I repeated, gripping the phone tighter. She's not who she appears to be. The voice was female, hushed, choked with emotion. Before I could ask a single question, the call disconnected. I sat frozen, coffee growing cold in front of me. That tone, it wasn't malicious or gossipy. It was desperate, fearful, the voice of someone who needed help. I tried calling back, but the number was no longer in service. A burner phone, perhaps? My years watching crime shows with Michael on Sunday nights hadn't been wasted after all. Outside, the storm intensified. Rain lashed against the windows like tiny fists demanding entry. I moved to the living room, pulling out an old shoebox from the cabinet where I kept important papers. Inside was a business card from a man I'd hoped never to need. Raymond Doyle, private investigator. He'd helped my friend Marge when her husband disappeared with their savings 5 years ago. I'd kept his card, not because I thought I'd use it, but because that's what I did. Kept things just in case. Michael used to tease me about it. Mom, you're one empty margarine container away from being on that hoarding show. The memory made my chest ache, but I pushed through it, dialing the number with fingers that felt numb. Doyle Investigations. His voice was gruff, no nonsense. Mr. Doyle, this is Eleanor Wilson, Margaret Simmons's friend. You helped her a few years back when... I remember Marge, he cut in. What can I do for you, Mrs. Wilson? I hesitated. Saying it out loud would make it real, make me the kind of mother who spies on her son's fiancé. But wasn't I already the kind of mother who'd been cut out of her son's wedding? What did I have to lose? I need information on someone. A woman named Vanessa Harrison. She works at Lakeside Realty in Cleveland, but I have reason to believe she might have come from Columbus. And I swallowed hard. And that Harrison might not be her real name. There was a pause, the sound of paper rustling. This personal? It's my son's fiancé. They're getting married Saturday. My voice cracked. Without me. Another pause. That's a tight timeline, Mrs. Wilson. Can't promise much by Saturday. Anything, I said. Anything you can find. After giving him what little information I had, I hung up. The rain had stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I moved to the window, watching water drip from the eaves of the house. What was I doing? Had grief and rejection pushed me this far? To hire a stranger to dig into the past of the woman my son loved? But that voice on the phone, that wasn't imagination. That was real fear. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through motions without really being present. At the grocery store, I bumped into Linda Watson, whose daughter had gone to school with Michael. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and she immediately started gushing about wedding preparations. "The church looks absolutely beautiful, Eleanor. Those flower arrangements must have cost a fortune, and I heard they've booked the entire Lakeview Hotel for the reception." I nodded, a tight smile fixed on my face, as if I knew all about it, as if I hadn't been completely erased from the event. "You must be so proud," she continued, oblivious to my pain. "Michael is such a catch. And Vanessa, well, she's certainly glamorous, isn't she? Though between you and me," she lowered her voice conspiratorially, "some think she's a bit much for our little town." I murmured something non-committal and escaped as quickly as I could, forgetting half the items on my shopping list. Back home, I sat on my porch swing, the same one where I'd rocked Michael to sleep during countless summer nights when he was small. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink that would have normally brought me peace. My silent contemplation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into my driveway, a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. Raymond Doyle stepped out, manila envelope in hand. "Mrs. Wilson," he nodded, climbing the porch steps. "Got something you might want to see. Wasn't going to wait until after the wedding." My heart thundered in my chest as he handed me the envelope. That was fast. "Some information is easier to find than others," he said cryptically, "especially when it involves public records." With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and pulled out several papers. News clippings, court documents, a photograph of a woman who looked remarkably like Vanessa, but with lighter hair and a different name. "Jennifer Lawson," Doyle said quietly. "Wanted for questioning in Columbus regarding missing client funds. Approximately $250,000. Disappeared 18 months ago. Resurfaced here as Vanessa Harrison about 16 months ago." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. I clutched the porch railing for support. "There's more," he continued. "She's done this before. Different name, different city." I stared at the evidence in my hands, my mind reeling. In that moment, I made a silent, unwavering decision. Wedding invitation or not, I would be at that church on Saturday, not just as a mother fighting for her place, but as someone who might be the only person standing between my son and a terrible mistake. Saturday morning arrived with a sky so blue it hurt to look at it. The kind of perfect day brides dream about. I'd barely slept, the file folder of Doyle's findings sitting on my nightstand like a ticking bomb. All night I tossed and turned, wrestling with what to do. Should I confront Michael directly? Go to the police? Or was I making a terrible mistake that would push my son away forever? I stood in front of my closet, fingers running over the navy blue dress I'd bought months ago, when I still believed I'd be sitting in the front row of the church, beaming with pride, tags still attached. It had cost nearly a week's pension, but I'd wanted to look special for Michael's big day. Now it seemed like a cruel joke. After a moment's hesitation, I took it off the hanger anyway. If I was going to crash my son's wedding, I would at least look respectable doing it. My hands shook as I applied my makeup. Nothing fancy, just enough to hide the dark circles under my eyes from sleepless nights. A touch of the rose-colored lipstick my late husband used to love. A spritz of the perfume Michael had given me for Christmas 3 years ago, back when he still remembered birthdays and holidays. I pinned my silver hair into a simple updo, the way I'd worn it on my own wedding day 40 years earlier. The drive to St. Andrew's Church was only 15 minutes, but it felt like crossing an ocean. Each familiar landmark, the elementary school where Michael had once played t-ball, the ice cream shop where we'd celebrated his first A in math, seemed to whisper accusations. What kind of mother spies on her son? What kind of mother crashes a wedding? The kind who loves her child enough to save him from disaster, I told myself firmly, gripping the steering wheel tighter. I arrived an hour early, parking my aging Buick several blocks away to avoid being spotted. The church looked like something from a fairy tale. White ribbons adorning the entrance, flower arrangements bursting with roses and lilies, guests already beginning to arrive in their finery, ladies in pastel dresses and elaborate hats, men in dark suits, looking uncomfortable in the May heat. I waited until the church was nearly full before slipping inside. No one paid attention to an elderly woman entering alone, taking a seat in the last pew. I was invisible, as I'd been for months now in my son's life. But today, that invisibility was my advantage. From my position, I could see everything. The altar decorated with candles and more flowers, the groomsmen fidgeting in their tuxedos, the musicians quietly tuning their instruments, the church filled with the soft murmur of excited guests, the occasional laugh punctuating the gentle hum of conversation. And then I saw him, my Michael, standing at the front, hands clasped before him, shoulders tense. Even from a distance, I could see he was pale, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead, despite the church's air conditioning. He kept glancing at his watch, then toward the back doors. Was he looking for me? Did some part of him hope his mother would defy the exclusion and come anyway? Or was he simply nervous, like any groom on his wedding day? The organist began to play, and everyone stood, turning toward the entrance. I remained seated, not wanting to draw attention. The bridesmaids processed in first, 4 young women in lavender dresses, each carrying a small bouquet of white roses. I recognized one as Vanessa's cousin from a photo Michael had shown me months ago. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The music swelled, the doors opened wide, and there she was, Vanessa Harrison, or Jennifer Lawson, or whatever her real name might be. She was stunning, I had to admit. Her dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk, hugging her slender figure before flowing out in a dramatic train. Her dark hair was piled high, a delicate veil cascading down her back. She moved with grace, with confidence, with the air of someone who'd been planning this moment her entire life. But her eyes, those eyes didn't match the serene smile on her lips. They darted around the church, calculating, assessing. When they landed on her groom, there was no softening, no look of love, just satisfaction, like someone who'd just closed a particularly difficult business deal. As she passed my pew, I shrank back slightly, though I doubted she'd recognize me even if she looked directly at me. We'd only met 3 times, and each time she'd made it clear I wasn't worth her attention. She reached the altar and Michael took her hand. I could see him trembling. Not the joyful excitement of a man about to marry his beloved, but something else. Something that looked uncomfortably like fear. The ceremony began. The pastor spoke of love and commitment, of journeys shared and obstacles overcome together. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my heart. This should have been a moment of joy, watching my son begin a new chapter. Instead, I sat clutching my purse, where Doyle's file contained evidence that could shatter everything. Behind me, I became aware of whispers, not the usual wedding whispers, exclamations over the bride's dress, or speculation about the cost of the flowers. These were different, more urgent. Did you hear about her mother? Completely disappeared. No one's seen her in over a year. I strained to listen without turning around, my heart suddenly racing. Not my disappearance they were discussing. Vanessa's mother, the mysterious absence that no one seemed to question. She told everyone her mother moved to Arizona for health reasons, a woman's voice murmured. But my sister lives in Phoenix and offered to visit her, and suddenly the story changed to Florida. The pastor's voice droned on, but I was no longer listening to him. Pieces were falling into place in my mind, connections forming like lightning strikes. The mysterious caller, could it have been Vanessa's mother? Not missing at all, but hidden away, silenced. I clutched the pew in front of me, suddenly dizzy with the implications. If Vanessa had lied about her identity, stolen money, what else might she be capable of? And what might she do when she discovered I knew? The pastor's voice filled the church. resonating off the stained glass windows that cast kaleidoscope patterns across the congregation. His words about love and commitment seemed to float above us like soap bubbles, beautiful, iridescent, and utterly fragile. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, he intoned, his weathered face solemn beneath silver hair. But thoughtfully, with reverence and honor, I watched my son's face, searching for signs of the little boy who once climbed into my lap during thunderstorms, the teenager who'd confided his dreams of becoming an architect, the young man who'd promised, "No matter what, Mom, it's always going to be you and me against the world." That boy was gone, replaced by this pale stranger whose Adam's apple bobbed nervously as he swallowed. Vanessa stood beside him, statuesque and poised. Her perfectly manicured hand rested on his arm with just the right amount of pressure. Not too possessive, not too detached. Everything about her was calibrated, from the precisely applied makeup to the careful way she tilted her head when the pastor spoke, as if deeply moved by his words. I'd spent enough years watching people at the bank to recognize performance when I saw it, and this woman was performing. The sunlight shifted, a cloud momentarily blocking the brilliant May sunshine. The church dimmed slightly, as if nature itself was setting the stage for what was about to unfold. If anyone here knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, the pastor continued, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was my moment, the climactic scene in every wedding movie, where the objector rises dramatically, points an accusing finger, and reveals shocking truths. My hand tightened around my purse, where Doyle's file contained enough evidence to halt the ceremony instantly. But I remained silent, not out of cowardice, but strategy. Making a public scene would only push Michael further away. He might never forgive me, might never learn the truth about the woman he was about to marry. No, I needed to be smarter than that. The moment passed. The pastor nodded, satisfied, and moved on to the vows. Michael's voice shook slightly as he promised to love, honor, and cherish. Vanessa's vows were delivered with theatrical precision, her voice catching at just the right moments to suggest overwhelming emotion. It was during the ring exchange that everything changed. The soft music playing in the background was suddenly interrupted by a harsh electronic trill. Once, twice, 3 times. Michael's face drained of all color as he recognized the sound. His phone, ringing from inside his jacket pocket. A murmur rippled through the congregation. The pastor paused, eyebrows raised. Vanessa's serene expression faltered for just a heartbeat before she recovered, placing a gentle hand on Michael's arm. "Ignore it," she whispered, loud enough for those in the front rows to hear. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes had hardened to flint. The ringing stopped. Collective relief sighed through the church. The pastor cleared his throat, ready to continue. Then it started again, louder this time, more insistent, like an alarm that refused to be silenced. Michael shifted uncomfortably, looking like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Sweat beaded visibly on his forehead now, and his hands trembled as he fumbled with the ring he was supposed to place on Vanessa's finger. "Turn it off!" she hissed, smile still plastered across her face, but voice sharp with command. I can't!" Michael stuttered, his free hand instinctively moving toward his pocket before stopping, caught between social protocol and whatever urgency the caller represented. The ringing stopped again. 3 seconds of blessed silence, then started once more, the electronic melody becoming almost frantic, as if the caller was jabbing at the redial button with desperate fingers. By now, everyone was exchanging uncomfortable glances. The perfect wedding was unraveling thread by thread. The pastor's professional expression had slipped, revealing annoyance beneath. One of the bridesmaids shifted from foot to foot, eyes darting nervously to Vanessa. "For heaven's sake, Michael!" Vanessa snapped, facade cracking further. "Just turn the damn thing off!" A collective gasp rippled through the church at her language. Michael, looking like a man caught in headlights, finally reached into his pocket and pulled out the phone. I watched as he glanced at the screen, expecting him to silence it and return to the ceremony. Instead, his face transformed. The color that had drained away rushed back in. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly in what looked like shock. And something else. Recognition. "I have to take this," he said, voice stronger than it had been all day. "You most certainly do not," Vanessa responded, teeth clenched behind her smile. She grabbed his wrist, fingernails digging in visibly. "We are in the middle of our wedding." The pastor coughed awkwardly. "Perhaps we could take a brief moment." "No!" Vanessa cut him off sharply. Then, composing herself with visible effort, added more softly, "We've planned this day for so long. Everyone is here. It's just a phone call. It can wait." But the ringing continued, relentless as a heartbeat. And Michael, my son who had always been too kind, too accommodating, too eager to please, did something I hadn't seen him do in years. He stood his ground. "I'm sorry," he said, not to Vanessa, but to the pastor. "I need to take this call." Before anyone could respond, he pressed the answer button and raised the phone to his ear. The church fell silent, every guest leaning forward slightly, straining to hear. "Hello?" Michael's voice echoed in the hushed space. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. I watched his face transform as he listened to the voice on the other end. First confusion, then shock, then a dawning horror that aged him 10 years in 10 seconds. From my seat at the back, I could hear nothing of what was being said, but I could see everything. Vanessa's face contorting with rage, the bridesmaids exchanging alarmed glances, the best man stepping forward as if to support Michael, who suddenly looked like he might collapse. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, and from deep within me, a strange calm rose like still water, because in that moment, as the phone call continued and my son's world visibly crumbled around him, I understood. I understood perfectly. The silence in St. Andrew's Church was so complete, you could hear the soft flutter of the candle flames near the altar. Every eye was fixed on my son as he stood there, phone pressed to his ear, his wedding ceremony frozen in a tableau of shocked faces and held breath. "Who is this?" Michael's voice cracked as he asked the question. His free hand gripped the altar rail so tightly his knuckles turned white. Vanessa lunged toward him, her perfect composure shattered like fine crystal dropped on concrete. "Hang up the phone, Michael," she hissed, reaching for it. "Now!" He stepped back, turning away from her, pressing the phone closer to his ear. The movement was subtle but significant, the first time I'd seen him physically distance himself from her. "Yes, I can hear you," he said into the phone, his voice stronger now. "Please, speak slowly. Where are you?" Vanessa's face transformed. The beautiful bride was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. She glanced around the church, seemingly taking inventory of the witnesses, calculating damage control. "Ladies and gentlemen," she addressed the congregation with a brittle laugh, "I'm so sorry for this unexpected interruption. Perhaps we could take a short recess while my fiancé deals with this work emergency." The last two words were razor sharp, a warning directed at Michael. But Michael wasn't listening to her anymore. His attention was completely focused on the caller, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to horror with each passing second. "Columbus?" he repeated loud enough for everyone to hear. "Shady Pines Retirement Home." A murmur rippled through the guests. Behind me, the whispers intensified. That's where my aunt was before she passed. Terrible place, understaffed. Why would someone be calling from there now? I remained perfectly still, watching, waiting. Something was unfolding, something I hadn't anticipated. The file in my purse suddenly seemed secondary to the drama playing out before us. Michael's eyes, wide with shock, locked on Vanessa. "She says she's your mother," he said, voice hollow. "She says her name is Margaret Lawson." The name hit the church like a thunderclap. Lawson. The same surname Raymond Doyle had discovered in his investigation. Jennifer Lawson, wanted for questioning about missing funds. I felt a chill creep up my spine as pieces clicked into place. Vanessa's reaction was immediate and violent. She lunged for the phone again, her beautifully manicured nails now resembling claws. "Give me that," she snarled, abandoning all pretense of the demure bride. Michael held the phone out of reach, his height advantage keeping it safely away from her grasp. "She says you left her there," he continued, voice rising. "She says you abandoned her, that you told everyone she moved to Arizona, then Florida, that you changed your name, and she's mentally ill," Vanessa shouted, desperation edging her voice. "She doesn't know what she's saying. My mother has dementia, Michael, you know this." But did he? His face suggested otherwise. "Please." The voice from the phone was so loud now that even I could hear it faintly from my seat at the back of the church. A woman sobbing. "Please help me. She left me here with nothing. She took everything, my house, my savings." The pastor stepped forward, finally finding his voice. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately," he suggested, glancing nervously at the congregation where phones were beginning to appear, recording the unfolding drama. Michael ignored him. He was staring at Vanessa, as if seeing her for the first time. "You told me your mother was in a specialized care facility in Arizona," he said slowly. "You said she had round-the-clock nurses. You said the weather was better for her condition. She is, she was." Vanessa stumbled over her words, composure crumbling further. "We had to move her. Insurance issues. I was going to tell you after the honeymoon." The voice from the phone cut through her excuses. "She locked me away 3 months after my husband died. She sold my house. She stole my identity to access my accounts. Please, I've been trying to call for help for months, but they watched the phones. Today was my only chance when the regular staff called in sick." Gasps echoed through the church. One of the bridesmaids, Vanessa's cousin, I recalled, stepped back, distancing herself physically from the bride. The best man moved closer to Michael, a silent show of support. Vanessa's face contorted with fury. "You stupid old woman," she screamed at the phone. "You're ruining everything." Her words hung in the air, damning in their confirmation. No denial, no explanation, just rage at being caught. Michael's face hardened. With deliberate calm, he spoke into the phone again. "Ma'am, Mrs. Lawson, please tell me exactly where you are. The full address." "Shady Pines, Retirement Home 1842, Oakwood Drive, Columbus," the voice replied, steadier now. "Room 247. Please hurry. When she finds out I've called, I'm sending help right now," Michael promised. He lowered the phone slightly, turning to his best man. "James, call the Columbus police. Give them this address. Tell them to do a welfare check immediately." James nodded, already pulling out his own phone. Vanessa seemed to realize the game was up. Her eyes darted around the church, calculating escape routes. "This is ridiculous," she said, attempting to salvage some dignity. "I don't have to stand here and listen to these lies. We can sort this out after the wedding." "There isn't going to be a wedding," Michael said quietly. The words fell like stones in still water, ripples of shock expanding through the congregation. Vanessa's face went slack with disbelief, then hardened into something ugly. "You don't want to do this, Michael," she warned, voice low. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." It was the wrong thing to say. I watched my son straighten his shoulders, something of his father's quiet strength finally visible in his stance. "I think that's exactly the problem," he replied. "I'm beginning to see exactly what you're capable of." He turned to the stunned pastor. "I'm sorry, but this ceremony is over." From my seat at the back of the church, I felt a strange mixture of emotions wash over me: relief, vindication, and an overwhelming sadness for my son, whose heart was breaking in front of 200 guests. But beneath it all was something else. Pride. Pride in the man who was finally standing up for himself, who was choosing truth over comfortable lies. I rose from my seat quietly, planning to slip out before being noticed. But as I stood, Michael's gaze swept across the church and stopped when it reached me. For a long moment, our eyes locked across the sea of shocked faces. I saw recognition dawn, followed by something that looked remarkably like hope, and in that moment, I knew that while one door had closed for him today, another had just opened. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion, like a movie scene where the director wants you to feel every excruciating second. Vanessa's perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. her eyes narrowing to dangerous slits as she lunged for the phone still clutched in Michael's hand. "Give me that!" she shrieked, all pretense of the demure bride completely shattered. Her perfectly manicured nails clawed at his wrist, drawing thin lines of blood that bloomed against his white shirt cuff. "This is all a misunderstanding." But the voice from the phone continued, amplified by the church's perfect acoustics, so that everyone could hear the elderly woman's desperate pleas. "I am Margaret Lawson. I've been held against my will for 14 months. Please, please help me." The congregation erupted in shocked whispers, the sound rising like a wave through the vaulted ceiling. Several guests stood up, craning their necks to get a better view of the unfolding drama. Someone near the front was filming with their phone, the small device held high above the crowd. Michael stepped back, keeping the phone away from Vanessa's grasping hands. His face had taken on a strange calmness, the kind that comes only after shock has burned away all other emotions. "It's over, Vanessa," he said quietly, his voice somehow cutting through the chaos. "Or Jennifer, whatever your real name is." She froze, the color draining from her face at the sound of her true name. "Who told you that?" she whispered, eyes darting around the church until they landed with sudden recognition on me. "You," she hissed, "the meddling old woman." All eyes turned to follow her gaze. I remained standing, shoulders back, chin lifted slightly. I hadn't planned to be discovered, but now that I was, I wouldn't cower. Not anymore. "Mom?" Michael's voice cracked on the single syllable. "You came?" Before I could respond, Vanessa whirled back to face him, her strategy shifting in an instant from rage to desperate pleading. Tears sprang to her eyes, tears that hadn't appeared even during the most emotional parts of the vows. "Michael, baby, please," she begged, clutching at his arm. "Don't listen to her. Don't listen to any of them. Your mother has always hated me, you know that. She's trying to sabotage us, and that woman on the phone. She's confused. She gets things mixed up. I told you about her condition. Is that why you changed your name?" Michael asked, his voice steady now. "Because your mother is confused." The question hung in the air between them. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed, like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. The phone was still active, the caller still listening. "Michael," the elderly voice called out, "are you still there? Please don't hang up. I'm so afraid of what she'll do when she finds out I called." "I'm here, Mrs. Lawson," Michael answered, never taking his eyes off Vanessa. "Help is on the way. The police will be there soon." Vanessa's face twisted again, calculation replacing desperation. "Police?" she spat. "You called the police on me? On our wedding day?" She turned to address the stunned congregation, arms spread wide in a gesture of innocence. "Do you all see how he's treating me? After everything I've done for him?" But her performance was falling flat. Too many pieces of the puzzle had been revealed. "What exactly have you done for him, Jennifer?" The voice came from one of the bridesmaids, a young woman with honey blonde hair, who stepped forward, removing the lavender fascinator from her head as if discarding a disguise. "Besides lie about who you are?" Vanessa's eyes widened in genuine shock. "Allison, what are you—" "I work for the Columbus Dispatch," the bridesmaid interrupted, her voice ringing clearly through the church. "I've been investigating a series of elder fraud cases for the past 8 months. Cases where wealthy seniors suddenly find their accounts emptied and their assets transferred after meeting a charming young financial advisor." She turned to the congregation, a woman who changes her name and appearance in each new city. The revelation sent another shockwave through the guests. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. From the back of the church, I watched as Vanessa's carefully constructed world began crumbling around her. "This is absurd," she sputtered, backing away from both Michael and the bridesmaid-turned-journalist. "These are lies, all lies. Then why is my mother in a care facility under a false name?" The voice from the phone demanded stronger now. "Why did you tell everyone I moved to Arizona when I've been locked away less than an hour from here? Why did you empty my bank accounts and sell my house?" Vanessa's eyes darted around the church, looking increasingly cornered. Her gaze lingered on the side exit for a moment too long. "Don't even think about it," said James, Michael's best man. moving to block the doorway. "The police are on their way here too." I told them everything. For a brief moment, the church fell into an eerie silence, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. Vanessa seemed to collapse in on herself, her beautiful gown suddenly looking too large, too elaborate, a costume rather than wedding attire. She sank onto the altar steps, mascara streaking down her face in black rivers. "You don't understand," she whispered, though in the perfect acoustics of the church, everyone heard. "None of you understand what it's like to have nothing, to start with nothing, to be nothing." Michael looked down at her, his expression a complex mixture of disgust, pity, and grief. "That doesn't give you the right to steal from others, to abandon your own mother in a care facility and pretend she doesn't exist." "She was going to ruin everything," Vanessa said, as if this explained everything. "She recognized you from the newspaper announcement, said she'd seen your father's obituary years ago, knew your family had money. She was going to tell you about Columbus, about the others." The confession hung in the air, damning in its casualness. Michael stared at her for a long moment, then deliberately turned his back on her, addressing the phone again. "Mrs. Lawson, I promise you'll be safe soon. The police should be there any minute." "Thank you," the elderly voice quavered. "Thank you for believing me." The church doors at the back swung open, and two uniformed officers entered, looking slightly bewildered to find themselves interrupting a wedding. James quickly went to meet them, explaining the situation in hushed tones. As they made their way up the aisle toward Vanessa, Michael's eyes found mine again across the crowded church. This time, he didn't look away. Instead, he handed the phone to James and began walking towards me, moving against the tide of murmuring guests, his pace quickening with each step. When he reached me, we stood facing each other, neither speaking, both aware of the curious eyes watching us. Then, without warning, my son, my grown son who hadn't hugged me in over a year, wrapped his arms around me and buried his face in my shoulder, just as he had as a little boy after nightmares. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." I held him tight, my heart simultaneously breaking and mending. "Shh," I soothed, stroking his hair. "It's all right now. It's all going to be all right." Over his shoulder, I watched as the police officers handcuffed Vanessa, reading her rights as they led her down the aisle, a perverse mirror image of the triumphant exit she'd planned as a newlywed. Her eyes met mine one last time, filled with a hatred so pure it chilled me to the bone. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because I understood now, understood what had really been happening all along. I understood perfectly. He didn't get married that day. How could he after everything that had happened? The church emptied slowly, guests filing out in shocked silence or huddled in whispering groups. The elegant floral arrangements remained, their sweet scent now cloying in the aftermath of shattered illusions. The string quartet packed away their instruments, left without playing the triumphant recessional they'd rehearsed. I stayed with Michael through it all, through the additional police questioning, through his phone call to Columbus confirming that Margaret Lawson had indeed been rescued from Shady Pines, through the painful task of telling Vanessa's stunned relatives what little we knew. Her cousin, the real one, not the undercover journalist, collapsed in tears, insisting there must be some mistake. The caterer appeared, nervously asking about the reception. The wedding planner fluttered around uselessly, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. It was nearly sunset by the time we left the church. Michael walked beside me to my car, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, tie loosened, eyes hollow with exhaustion and grief. "I can't go back to the apartment," he said quietly. "Not tonight. Everything there, it's all tied to her." "Come home," I said simply, and he nodded, relief washing over his face. The drive back to my little house was silent. What could either of us say that would make sense of this day? The soft glow of evening settled around us as I turned onto Maple Street, the familiar sight of my porch light offering a beacon of normalcy in a world turned upside down. Inside, nothing had changed. The same worn furniture, the the same faded curtains, the same photos of Michael growing up that lined the hallway. Yet everything felt different, charged with a new awareness of how quickly certainty can dissolve into chaos. I made tea, the same remedy my mother had used for every crisis, big or small. Michael accepted the steaming mug with a weak smile, wrapping his long fingers around it as if seeking warmth. "I should have listened to you," he said finally, staring into the amber liquid. "All those times you tried to tell me something wasn't right. I thought you were just being overprotective, old-fashioned." I settled into my armchair across from him, feeling every one of my 63 years. "You were in love," I said gently, "or what you thought was love. Was I?" He looked up, eyes searching mine. "I don't even know anymore. It all feels like I was under a spell or something. The way she could make me think black was white, wrong was right." He shook his head slowly. "How could I have been so blind?" Outside, a gentle summer rain began to fall, pattering against the windows in a soothing rhythm. I took a sip of tea, choosing my words carefully. "Manipulators are experts at finding our weak spots," I said. "For you, it was your desire to please, to avoid conflict, your kind heart." I paused, memories flooding back. "You've been that way since you were little. Remember how you'd give away your lunch if another child forgot theirs? How you'd let other kids pick the games at recess, even when it was your turn to choose?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Dad used to say I'd give away my right arm if someone asked nicely enough." The mention of his father hung between us, bittersweet. "He worried about that," I admitted, "that people would take advantage of your generosity. That's why he was so tough on you sometimes. He wanted you to learn to stand up for yourself." Michael nodded slowly. "I never really did, though, did I? Not until today. Not until it was almost too late." "But you did," I reminded him, leaning forward to touch his knee. "When it mattered most, you stood your ground. You chose truth over comfort." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him processing the day's events, trying to make peace with his shattered plans and betrayed trust. "The police said she's done this before," he said finally. "3 times that they know of. Different names, different cities, always targeting wealthy older people or their families." He looked up, eyes haunted. "She was planning to do it to me, wasn't she? Get access to my accounts, Dad's insurance money." I nodded, seeing no point in softening the truth now. "Most likely. And when she discovered I might be a threat to her plans, she cut you out," he finished, understanding dawning. "Made me choose between you. And you chose her," I said without accusation. "Because that's what manipulators do. They isolate their victims from anyone who might see through the facade." The rain intensified outside, drumming against the roof. Michael set down his mug and covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I moved to sit beside him on the sofa, wrapping my arm around him as I had when he was small. "I'm so ashamed," he whispered through his fingers. "So humiliated. Everyone knows now, the whole town. They know you were deceived by a professional con artist," I corrected gently. "There's no shame in that." He lowered his hands, eyes red-rimmed but clearer somehow. "How did you know? What made you suspicious enough to come to the church today?" I hesitated, then decided complete honesty was the only way forward. I told him about the mysterious phone calls, about hiring Raymond Doyle, about the files still sitting in my purse with evidence of Vanessa's, Jennifer's, previous identities and crimes. "You went to all that trouble," he said when I finished, awe in his voice. "Even after I pushed you away, even after I hurt you. That's what mothers do," I said simply. "We love without conditions. We fight for our children even when they don't want us to." He was quiet again, absorbing this. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes for the first time that day. "When your phone kept ringing during the ceremony," he said, "I saw you in the back of the church. Did you know that? I looked up and there you were, sitting so calmly while everything fell apart around us." I nodded. "I saw you see me. You didn't look surprised," he continued. "When the truth about Vanessa came out, you just smiled, like you'd been expecting it all along." "Not expecting," I corrected. "Just prepared for the possibility. He shook his head in wonder. How did you stay so calm? I was falling apart up there, and you just sat there like you understood everything that was happening. I thought about that moment. The phone ringing, the secrets unraveling, the truth finally emerging into the light, about the strange peace that had settled over me as I watched justice unfold in its own time. Because I did, I said softly. I understood perfectly. The rain continued through the night, washing away the last remnants of a perfect spring day that had held such different promises at its beginning. Michael slept in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by soccer trophies and faded posters, safe in the embrace of familiar walls. In the morning, we would begin the long process of untangling his life from Jennifer Lawson's web of lies. There would be accounts to check, statements to give, explanations to offer to friends and colleagues. There would be grief to process, trust to rebuild. But for now, in this quiet house filled with memories both painful and precious, there was just a mother and son finding their way back to each other. And in that simple truth, there was healing enough to begin again. Sometimes the hardest truth to face is that love can blind us to danger standing right before our eyes. As a mother, I knew something was wrong, but even I couldn't have imagined the web of lies my son had become entangled in. Would you have stayed silent to keep peace? Or would you have risked everything, even your relationship with your child, to protect them from harm they couldn't see? Time reveals all truths, whether we're ready for them or not. That ringing phone in the middle of the ceremony wasn't just an interruption. It was destiny's way of preventing a terrible mistake. In life's darkest moments, we discover who truly stands beside us and who was merely passing through. Remember, when someone tries to separate you from those who have always loved you, question their motives. True love brings people together. It doesn't build walls between them. If this story touched your heart or made you think about the relationships in your own life, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the stories that hurt the most to hear are the ones we need most desperately. Subscribe to our channel for more true stories of family, betrayal, and the strength it takes to rebuild what's been broken. The truth may be painful, but as I learned that day in the church, understanding it perfectly is the first step toward healing.